ask people who they're trying to reach, they say anyone. Um, it's great that we want to be inclusive with who we reach. Our reach can be inclusive, but when we think about intentional partners, especially for like asking for funding or asking for big changes, like in the sample letter today, we were reaching out to a school a superintendent or principal, right? You need to know who the key person is. So that's called your intended audience. So keep that in mind. So just a little bit about myself, some background. So I'm a photographer, I'm a teaching artist. I do poetry, and I also currently work at the California Institute of the Arts, which is CalArts, and I work in our career center. So I help people to apply for jobs, and I help people to connect with employers and to fulfill their sort of mission as an artist. And I'm also a professor. I'm going to be teaching 2 classes next year. One class is about creative entrepreneurship, and then another one is about branding and marketing yourself. So those are a little bit of my qualifications and just some of the things I'm interested in. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. So the first one is, what is your current color obsession? Like, what is your favorite color this season? I went with pink. I just love bubblegum pink. Just so fun, like my glasses. I just think it's just so cool, and it's just so like, it reminds me of Barbie. It reminds me of just like fun. So what is a color that you're obsessed with? It could be like something that you like to wear, or a trend that you, or just your favorite color. So put that in the chat. And then the next thing I want you to put in is your superpower. So this superpower is something that is very, very close to you, and it's something that you can do with your eyes closed that just comes really natural. For me, my superpower is authenticity. So it's just something that it just comes easy for me, and I feel like a lot of people haven't tapped into that, so it becomes a superpower for me. But what is your superpower? What is something that you go to that's like a strength, or something that just flows out of you like water? And I'm an Aquarius, so if you want to share your astrology as well. So that's a lot of things. Maybe just share one or all three: your favorite color, your superpower, and your sun sign, if you partake in astrology stuff. Okay, taupe. Okay, that's a beautiful color. Very calming. Another Aquarius. Okay, green. The ability to have empathy for everyone. That's great. While you write that, one of my favorite quotes is, "People can only meet you as deeply as they have met themselves." So this one's super cool because I feel like sometimes when I would wonder why someone didn't understand me, or why someone was, let's keep it relevant to you all. Like, maybe you have a cause that you're passionate about, but someone else might not be as passionate about it. And sometimes we try to figure out why someone wouldn't, maybe get it, or why they aren't as excited about it as you are. And maybe you have a particular experience that makes you more aligned to that. And so, it's just sometimes being aware that everyone, has a different experience, and maybe they haven't, deeply thought about that thing. And so it's not a way to judge, but it's just a way to sort of like understand people, I think. All right, cool. So I'm gonna move on to the next slide because we don't have as much time this time. Okay, so today, like I said, we're going to talk about the components of the letter of outreach. We're going to do a peer review activity, and I'm going to show you a template, and then we'll do some LinkedIn basics, and then I'll leave space for a Q&A. So I wanted to start with the components of this letter, and also just talk about what it is. So like I said, the letter itself is just a written version of this correspondence that you're sending to a person that's in your intended audience. So for example, if I wanted to do a project on climate change, one of my intended audience members may be someone who was passionate about climate change. So that could be someone that works for an organization. It could be someone I know. It also could be someone that I don't know. And I wanted to let you all know that it's important. The tone of your letter is going to change based on your relationship with the person. So if you don't know the person at all, that's called a cold correspondence. That means that you've never met them, but you want to get to know them. Now, if it's a familiar person, then your tone is a little different because they know you. And so it can be a little bit more casual, but it still should be as clear in terms of what you're asking. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections, I would say, to this letter. Now, these are pretty interchangeable in terms of the order, but I think you should think about these things whenever you write a correspondence, and it doesn't always have to be a formal correspondence. So the first thing is the intro. So you always want to introduce yourself using your name, your title. That could be like if you're in school or if you work for an organization, your job title, and your affiliation. That could be your school, the company you work for. You kind of want to let the person know who you are first. You don't want to just jump straight into the ask or the point. The next thing is the context. So you always want to give context as to how you know this person, right? So again, if it's a cold ask, you have to list how you found them. Well, I came across your website when I was researching arts advocates in Los Angeles County. Or I see that you are the assistant director for climate change at such and such organization. Or, a colleague of mine or a friend of mine goes to your school. Let's say you're writing to someone else's principal, it's not your school. You always want to give context as to who you are and where you found this person from, because one, it can be kind of off-putting if a person doesn't understand why you're reaching out to them. I have an example. I had a student write to me from Harvard Business School recently because he had a venture that he thought my students might like. But I kind of thought it was spam because it just felt scammy, even though it wasn't, because they didn't give context as to how they found me. So it was a cold ask, and they were like, "Hi, Lonnie, this, that, and that." And I'm like, whoa. So I wrote back and I'm like, "Hi, I'd love to help, but can you let me know where you found my contact info from?" And they were able to explain it. So you don't want to be, you don't want to scare people. You want them to feel like, oh, I found you here. This is where I know you. So you kind of want to give context to the relationship. And so the next section is the ask. So the ask needs to be clear and specific. So whatever it is that you're asking for, whether that be funding, whether it be, sometimes you just need advice or mentorship, you always want to think about what you're asking for and write it out clearly and specifically. And we'll look at that in an example because the student that wrote a letter did a really good job with that. And then I want to talk a little bit about SMART goals. Let me know in the chat if you've ever heard of SMART goals. SMART is an acronym, and it's usually what we use to make sure that our goals are clearly defined. And I think this is a really good model to use as you're creating your asks, because essentially asks are goals, right? So if you're asking someone something, it's related to a goal that you have, right? The mission of your advocacy, or the mission of your organization. Eventually, those of you that will work for other nonprofits and organizations or start your own, your ask should always be related to a goal. So we want to use the SMART goal philosophy to make sure that our goals are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. And I'll explain what that is. And the next thing is going to be a call to action or next steps. This is the one that I find that most people forget to add, right? A call to action is a clear prompt for immediate action. So sometimes people just lay out what they need, the ask, but then there is no next step. And sometimes we hear this sort of feedback with, like, when people ask for things to be canceled or they ask for protests, right? Hey, don't use this soap because of their practices, right? That would be a clear call to action. But how long are we not using the soap? Are we not using it forever? How long are we, if we're protesting something, for how long and how are we protesting it, right? That's the call to action. So if you just say, I found out that the practices for this clothing company are, unethical, we should stop shopping there, right? But that's not a clear call to action. So the clear call to action would be, don't shop online there. It would be cancel your subscriptions with that company. It would be, if you have stock in that company, make sure, it's really being specific. And if it's for a certain amount of time, maybe you only want to do it for a certain amount of time, just like the strike that we just had with the actors and the writers, right? They had clear calls to action. They weren't coming to work. They were protesting until they got a response to their requests. So the call to action in that case was respond to these requests. And here's the list of requests. So make sure that you include that. And I'll show you that in an example. The last one, I think, is the second to last thing that people forget is to add their contact info. So if you're emailing the person, they already technically have your contact info, but if you're just writing them on Instagram or whatever, you want to be clear about how you want to be contacted. So whatever your boundary is around contact, is it that you want them to sign a petition? Is it that you want them to email you? Is it that you want them to call you? Do you want to meet in person for coffee? Like, you really want to make sure that they know how to reach you, because especially when we're talking about influential people, they're usually busy. So they need the call to action to be clear and quick. So, and then close it out. So that's like, you know, an important thing too. So when we talk about what this is, it's a targeted, purposeful message designed to initiate connections and convey information. So initiate connection, convey information. Initiate connection, convey information. So you're trying to connect and you're trying to convey. So you want to communicate something to someone. So let's look at an example, and let's drop that link in the chat for the example, and I'm going to pull it up too. So we have a letter here that was written by Sophie, I believe. And so I wanted to use that letter as a real life example that would help us to understand it. And there is going to be a link in the chat where you can follow along as well. So I've highlighted some sections here so that we can be super clear about what part of the letter is being highlighted. So let me just do this. So, okay, it's a full screen. So the first thing here, Superintendent Nelson, it actually should say dear. It said dear, my bad. So dear Superintendent Nelson. So that is the greeting. So you want to make sure that you are addressing the person by their name or their last name or whatever, you know, that they are being, or their title. Okay. And then you're going to introduce yourself. We talked about that. My name is Sophie Church. And then you want to give context. Remember that, right? I'm a sophomore at Roosevelt School of the Arts. So now they know, oh, this is Sophie. They're a sophomore at my school, or a sophomore at a school that I'm not a part of. It doesn't really matter, right? Even if you know the person, you still want to give them context, because that's going to be a practice that you can have. Okay, so we're going to go down to this section of the letter. This is where we're kind of starting to lead into the ask. So it's the topic of what you're asking for. So Sophie said, consider 2 asks that I have in order to help make FUSD a better place for the flourishing of the arts. Okay, so now we're leading into the ask. Okay, why is this person reaching out to me? Okay, now I know that it has something to do about the arts flourishing. All right, real simple, real straight to the point. And then we have the asks. Now you can do this in different ways. You can do this in bullet form, or you can do it in paragraph form like Sophie did so well here. So we have 2 asks here. And they decided with their formatting to list the asks first as like short, brief sentences, make summer school original credit accessible at educational, and begin holding art showcases at a district level. This goes back to whatever your goals are, which we're going to go over the SMART goals, right? So there's a reason why you're reaching out. So you need to develop your SMART goals before you ask for anything, because what happens is that when people are interested in your asks, they're going to have more questions. So if you haven't done the work to make sure your asks are SMART goals, it's going to be hard for you to answer questions. Oftentimes, I see students that want something done, but then when it's time to take action, they haven't thought through the action steps. So you want to kind of think about the action steps before you ask, because that adult or that leader is probably going to have more questions. So once you kind of spell out what the asks are, you can then describe them in more detail. So for this first one, make summer school original credit accessible and educational. So the question is, what does that really mean? So in this case, this person was saying that for summer classes, they weren't really available to certain students. They were only available to students who maybe had failed a class. So their solution was to add more instructors so that students who wanted to access those classes could do so. So it's a way to write out a scenario that is explaining the depth of your ask. Okay. So we had two different asks here, and you can read that on your own. And then once we get to the bottom of the letter, we see the conclusion. The conclusion is sort of like wrapping up what was said above. And you want to give your farewell, thank you for your time and consideration, and then your contact information, if relevant, and your name again as you're signing it. So that's something that you can kind of keep with you to sort of, help you to see a great example of one that's already been written. But I also provided a template for you as well that you'll work on if you haven't already started writing your own. Okay, can y'all see the slide? Did the slides come back up or do? Okay, great. I know sometimes when I don't unshare, it like acts weird. Okay, so let's go through SMART goals, and then we'll have you do some work in your groups. All right, so SMART is a really great acronym that is great for you to think about when you're creating these goals. And we're going to look at what SMART means, and then we're going to look at some good and some bad examples of SMART goals. So the S in SMART stands for specific. That means that you make your goal specific and narrow for more effective planning. So for instance, if your goal is, let's say a non-specific goal would be, I would like to cook for my class. Okay. So if that's very non-specific, we don't know what you're cooking. We don't know why you're cooking it. We don't know which class, right? So specific, basically, the way I like to think of it is narrowing down and giving probably more details than you typically would. So a better example of a specific goal in that case would be, I would like to cook strawberry cupcakes for my dance class on December 20th, 2023, to celebrate the end of the semester. That's super specific now. The next piece of the acronym is measurable. So in measurable, we want to define what evidence will prove that you're making progress. So the thing about goals is SMART goals is that we need a way to measure if we're doing well, right? So for instance, if we're measuring cooking the cupcakes for the class, how do you know that what is the next step that you would need to make, and how are you going to measure it? So the first thing you might need to do is buy the ingredients, right? How do you measure that? Maybe you have a receipt to show yourself, hey, I have the ingredients for that. The next thing, you got to pack them. You want to walk yourself through every step and kind of find a way to check back your work. That's how you measure it, because if we don't have a system to measure it, it's often more difficult to complete the goal. So one good example is those of you who have Apple Watches. There is an app on there that tracks your steps, and it tracks your steps by the ring closing, right? So that's the measurement tool, is the ring closing. You know that if the ring isn't closed, you haven't met your goal. That's the same way you want to think about strategically making your asks or your goals. So attainable, make sure that you can reasonably attain the goal within a certain time frame. So if we go back to the example of the superintendent adding the another teacher to make the courses in Sophie's example, right? You have to talk to other school officials to see how long does a decision like that really take to make, right? So there may be different rules for hiring or budget constraints that might make this happening next semester really hard. So you want to make sure that it's attainable within the time frame. So if you're just like, I want this to happen tomorrow, that's probably not attainable for adding more professional staff, because there may be a fiscal year needs to happen, and there may need to be money raised and things like that. So you want to make sure that you can reasonably accomplish the goal within a certain time frame. Relevant. So relevant is the R in SMART, and it's basically saying that your goals should align with your values and your long-term objectives. So for instance, you want to make sure that your specific goal is relevant to your general mission, right? So you want to do things that are in line with your mission and your vision. So, if you are a climate change activist, it might not be relevant to, I don't know, work with a pro-pollution organization, right? Because it's like, oh, that's not relevant to my goal. So you want to make sure your intended audience and your goal is relevant to your values. So, and then the last one is time-based. I feel like time-based is probably the most important one. A realistic end of date for the task. So often we ask influential people to make changes, but how much time do you think is a realistic time for that thing to get done? So let's look at some examples. Hopefully this makes it a little more clear. So if we look at our example at the top, so for specific, this first example is I want to improve my health. Not a bad statement, right? That's great, right? But it's not specific. We don't know how you want to improve your health. We don't know what you plan to do in order to get that goal completed. So the SMART goal would be, I will improve my health by eating 60 grams of protein and drinking 2 liters of water every day. So now it's super specific, measurable. Maybe your goal is, I want to lose weight. So if your goal is, I want to lose weight, to make it measurable, I will lose this amount of weight by this date, by doing this activity and doing this activity, right? So now we have a way to measure it. So that way we have a scale, we can measure the weight, okay? Attainable. I want to eliminate sugary drinks from my diet. Now, if you're someone who maybe your diet was really full of sugary drinks, that might not be attainable for you right away, because maybe you need to wean off of it a little more slowly so that you can be successful to your goal. So in that case, your attainable goal would be, I will gradually reduce my sugary drink consumption every week in order to eliminate, right? So maybe you only drink 1 soda a day, right? Now it's more attainable than just saying, I'm going to go cold turkey. The fourth one is relevant. So I want to change my lifestyle. Again, what does that mean? An example would be, I'll improve my lifestyle by making conscious food decisions at every meal while focusing on protein and vegetables. And then the last one is time-based or time-oriented. So I want to be at my ideal weight, but the question is when, right? And then when also is relevant to how quickly you lose weight. So you kind of might need to test it and see, like, let's see how much weight I usually lose in a week or something like that. Here we put a date to it. So the time-oriented piece always has a date. So all of your goals should have dates attached. So the more SMART goal for that would be, I will achieve my ideal weight by December 31st. Okay, so I'm gonna stop there.
Thanks, Caitlin. We know we only have like a couple of minutes left with y'all, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back to Lonnie.
Yeah, so we have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to hear back from y'all and looking at the template and thinking about your goals. What was your experience like thinking about sending one of these letters? And did you feel like you didn't know the answer to something, or did you feel confident moving forward based on what the template said? You can write it in the chat if you want to. I understand if you want to talk out
loud. In terms of like the template, I think that the template really helps because I had a lot of ideas. Like I kind of already thought about who I wanted to reach out to and like my goals, but it definitely creates like an easy way to put it in, like so it's organized and I'm not worried about like, does this sound professional or does this sound right? So it definitely helps clear a lot up for me and is really helpful.
Good. That's good. That makes me smile because that's why I'm here. So that's good. If you think it's cool, then it's cool. That's good. Yes, that's the goal, right? And the good thing about the template too, remember that templates are not scripts, right? So they are just containers and ways to guide. So use your own voice, use your own sort of like style to write your own letter because you want it to feel like you, but you want it to feel, authentic to you, but you want to know, to your point, that you've touched all the elements. So anyone else want to share back?
Well, just a side note, I thought it was cool to see how like my like acquaintances or like partners are so like passionate about the arts and just like also like equity and inclusion in the arts and like at school. So that was cool.
Yeah, it is. It was cool to see that. That was nice. I think one thing that's important to think about, and I'm sure in your program you already think about this, is that like when there is when there's something at school, or it could be anywhere that you find could be better, we get a choice to make it better, right? Or to we can either say like, man, it sucks. I hate that there's not additional AP courses, or I hate that my teacher doesn't get a break, or whatever it is. I think those things that come up naturally for us as like points of frustration or that we think are unfair, it's like a good place to start because it's already something that we're doing and we care about. We're at time, but I wanted to share leave you with the LinkedIn info. So basically, I think that LinkedIn is a great space for you to think about looking up other people's journeys, their professional journeys. And so if you look at the profile, there's a profile checklist if you don't have a LinkedIn account already. So if you're thinking about starting one, that's a good place to start. So you can always email me if you have questions about your LinkedIn profile, or if you want to like me to look over it, I don't mind. So yeah, just I'll leave you with that. That's something I think is great because it gives you credibility when you're reaching out and asking people for support. Yeah, and so all my contact information is there as well. I have a podcast called What I Did Wrong. I also have email and a website. So if you want to learn more about me and what I do, feel free to check out any of those things. Any last minute questions or next steps, calls to action that you need help with or that you're thinking about?
And I just wanted to add that Lonnie graciously put all this together for us and has so many slides for the LinkedIn section that are super helpful. So we'll be following up with all this information. If you miss anything in the chat, don't worry, it'll come back around to have an opportunity to touch base about this. I encourage you to reach out to Lonnie if you have any follow-up questions. He is a wealth of knowledge. And also to your point, Benicio, connect with your fellow cohort members, connect with your fellow student voices leaders. Like everyone's super down to talk. Every time we have one of these, they get it like, it's, I think the excitement is from each other. So don't feel like you can't reach out because everybody is super open to that.
And I'm gonna also add, I know that y'all weren't able to submit your letters now, so but just yet, but I hopefully this gave y'all just like a good starting block to do that. So if y'all could get us those letters by the end of the week, that would be great, just to have something. It doesn't have to be perfect, y'all. I know that sometimes we really want to see, I mean, this is me, I want to sit here and I want to make sure it's absolutely perfect, but honestly, just get a couple of words onto a document, two paragraphs, 3 paragraphs or something, and just send it our way, so we can go ahead and give you further feedback on that. But yeah, if you don't have any other questions, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with Lonnie's presentation and contact info and all of that as well. But thanks again to Lonnie for being here and presenting today. Thank you as always, and thank you for showing up as well, sharing your evening with us. And that's it for us now.